Coming on here. That way we can experiment.
Dude, me, Alex, Cody, and somebody else.
He pushes in there like 1:30 for a meeting. He's like, all right, he's already on the spot. I'm like, we already knew that, but Jewel, she's like, oh, I'll just get a weekend now. I'm fine with that. He's like, oh, well, that's good.
Hey, Brad, I got some keys right here. Brad, over here, and I'll find that.
You need to. Oh no. Did it stick to my forehead?
I wish you would.
Oh, okay. Hold on. There we go. That's in front of your
Poor John, man. That's crazy. Good man. All right, good evening. We're going to get started with class and get moving. Billy's got a lot to cover, as always, and so we'll try to give him some time. Something I want to give you a heads up about. Well, let's see. Yeah, we'll do one thing for now. Is the winter retreat is this weekend. If you signed up, we posted about like the schedule and that kind of stuff. I think maybe the only thing that's not on that schedule is that the bus is going to leave at 6 from the Dalraida parking lot. And that means, ideally, if the bus leaves at 6, that means you've already been there and your stuff's in the bus and we're prepared to leave at 6. And so keep that in mind. Please don't roll in at 6. If you are going to, then you can text me and then I'll just determine if the absence is going to be excused or not. Anyways, let's see. There's also a packing list on there, so if you haven't been before, it's just like a normal camp. So like your bedding and your towels and toiletries and stuff, like normal stuff. I'd say bring layers. Lows are going to get into like the 30s or so, but the highs are going to get into like the 60s. And so just have some layers and whatever and be prepared for that. And then bring a Bible and notebook. We'll take, lots of lessons and stuff like that. If you have any questions regarding the winter retreat, let me know. The only other thing would be for pay. You can Venmo Dalraida Church, like at Dalraida Church, or you can just bring me cash, and we can work that out. Oh, with the bus. Technically, I'm over capacity in the bus right now. And so, but university's bringing 2 buses the same size as ours, and John's going to text me if they're at capacity with theirs or not. I don't think that they will be. And so, still let me know if you're going to ride, but we will need to know how many to anticipate. And so if you're planning to ride the bus, let me know so we don't leave you, okay? Let me know very soon. Also, please not like the day before so we can prepare. But anyways, I think that's all. Make sure you have money for your meal on the way back too. So there's that $30 in the meal on the way back. All right, I think that's all. Billy? All right, so before you open up your map, like I said, this is a visual representation of how an argument or a conversation about apologetics will go. So
You're out in open country. You don't really know where a conversation is going to start, but you want to get the ball rolling somehow. What's a good way? What are some questions that you can ask to cultivate a conversation with somebody? What are they?
What happens after we die?
All right, what happens after we die? What's another one you could use?
Where did everything go?
All right, where did everything come from? What else?
What are humans?
All right, what are humans? What else?
What is good?
What is good? And what is our purpose? All right, so you cultivate a conversation, you kind of get to go and see where somebody is, and then you get to navigate a little bit from there. But usually when you get in a conversation around those kind of questions, people are going to want to respond back because they probably know where you stand. You talked about, I went to church, or I went to a Christian college, or I'm studying this. And so they maybe have some questions to you about what you believe, and maybe you feel like you get pinned down. But if you get pinned down in a conversation, how can you corral it back together so that you stay in the driver's seat? What are some questions you can ask in return if somebody starts firing off some things at you? What's the first thing you can ask?
What led you to that conclusion?
All right, what led you to that conclusion? We can manipulate that a little bit and say, what do you mean by that? So if they have an accusation against Christianity, or maybe they're supporting maybe their worldview or whatever they think, you want to slow it down a little bit and say, okay, explain that a little bit more. What do you mean by that? And then you get to that second question, which is what?
Have you thought about this?
All right, no, before that one. How did you
come to that conclusion?
All right, how'd you come to that conclusion? So, is this something that you've studied? Is it based off of experiences? Is it something that you were taught? Is it something that you've been exposed to just in your culture or your church or wherever it is? So, you feel like maybe you were getting pinned down, but you want to turn it back around, hey, explain your view a little bit more. What do you think about this? And then get them to provide evidence for their stance. So how did you come to that conclusion? But when it comes time finally for you to offer some counter evidence, how can you bring that in the form of a question?
Have you ever considered?
All right, have you ever considered? Now that's it's not, people are not going to feel attacked when you're just like, hey, here's an opposite view that maybe you haven't thought about. Here's some counter evidence, and you have to wrestle with it the same way I do. So if you're going to say, have you ever considered, you also need to be ready to do some studying as well. There's a lot of things that we're going to get into as we go through this class that we're just scratching the surface, all right? As we talked about last week with our argument, we're about to get there. There's a lot to unpack in that particular classical argument. We're going to introduce another one tonight. But you want to be prepared, some things that are in your wheelhouse, what you enjoy, and that's what's fun about this conversation. You get to navigate it. You're in control. So you're in the open country. You find out what somebody believes. You reined it in a little bit in a conversation, but now you're going to be kind of at a bit of a crossroads. You're going to treat this as a map where you're going to say, all right, how do I want to navigate this? Now, we're going to be expanding this map so we can do a lot more in our conversations, but so far, we got one path, okay? It's kind of like when you first moved here to Montgomery and you knew where you knew where Faulkner was and you knew where Taco Bell was. Like, those are the two connections that you got. Maybe you broadened your horizons just a little bit and you found out where McDonald's was. Like, so you slowly started expanding. Now you know all the good stuff, right? You know where all the restaurants and places are around town. You can navigate depending on what somebody wants or what they need or what you're interested in. The same way in a conversation like this, you can navigate. Now, we're building to that repertoire, that tool belt. And we introduced last week, coming to that intersection, you can either go to evidence for God or you can go evidence for Jesus. Let's just entertain the part where you're going to give some counter evidence to their beliefs potentially, or you're going to build a positive case for God. And we introduced an argument last week, what we call the three classical arguments. We introduced one last week. What is the name of that argument? The cosmological argument. All right? Every argument we're going to introduce into that little cluster of buildings, we're going to introduce a new one tonight. In that cluster of buildings, each one of these arguments has two premises and a conclusion. All right? What is the first premise of the cosmological argument?
Everything that has a beginning has a creator.
All right, everything that has a beginning has a cause. Right? So we're going to go with a cause. You're on to something there. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. The first premise, what do you want to do with the first premise? Here we go. Now this is where we got to test this a little bit more. All right, you need to illustrate. You got to give an example. And so everything that has a beginning has a cause. You see a plate of cookies, and you want to know where did these things come from. So the first premise, you always illustrate something. It can be comical, or that's just serious if you're talking about cookies. But it's like you want to talk about something that has a beginning, has a cause. All right, what's the second premise of the cosmological argument? The universe has a beginning. What's your goal in the second premise of the argument? What are you supposed to be doing there? You illustrate on the first and you prove in the second. So we need to prove that the universe had a beginning. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. You could do it just talking about where did everything come from. You've already cultivated a conversation. Potentially you're here because somebody says, where did everything come from? Do you believe it came from nothing, or do you believe it came from something? So you want to prove that the universe had a beginning. You could do it just by throwing out some extra questions. Does it make more sense that there was nothing and something came from it, or that you had a being who is all-powerful that was able to do these things? All right, so you prove the second one. And then what do you get at the conclusion? What's the conclusion of the cosmological argument? So everything that had a beginning had a cause, the universe had a beginning, and what's the conclusion? Therefore, the universe has a cause. And what do you get when you get to the conclusion? You've got that, and it's like, okay, it has a cause, but what's the big part that you learn in the conclusion of those arguments? God is, right? You're going to always learn something about God. So from the cosmological argument, you get that God is spaceless, timeless, and immaterial because he is outside of those things. If space, time, and and matter had a beginning, then your cause has to be greater than those things. So he's spaceless, timeless, immaterial, and he's personal. He made a decision to make those things. So, all right, every time we're going to do this, and I want to take time, this is a practical class. If you want to get the science behind it, I got books for you. We got ones that we're adding to the bookshelves. I saw another one that popped up from Apologetic Express, 7 Reasons to Believe. There's a lot of good ones. So you can go get the extra evidence, but I want you to know the formula for the arguments, the conversations, so you know how to navigate them. All right, does that make sense? So every class, I want to spend time doing this. I want to get faster with it, but you got them stored away, all right? So let's go on in our study for tonight and introduce our new argument, which is going to be let's see if we can get our animations going here. All right, we're going to introduce the teleological argument. I got ahead of myself. I have all the animations. Hold on. Wait. Bam. All right, we're going to talk about the teleological argument. These are just fancy terms, all right? It's just, once again, these are called the classical ones. Cosmological, you're looking at the universe itself. The teleological, does anybody know what the purpose behind this argument is? What's it focused on? Anybody know?
Design of the universe. Purpose.
Okay, telos. You're Greek, right? I know a little Greek. Where's Mark Davidson when we talk about a little Greek around here? It's like, all right, so this term, it talks about something that has an end or a purpose behind it. So the universe itself, not only that it has a beginning, but it has a purpose. So we're going to formulate an argument, 2 premises and a conclusion. And remember, on the first premise, we're going to have to illustrate it. So in this, the first premise of the teleological argument, so you can open up your map and follow through with here, is every design has a designer. All right, and that's intuitive. That's simple, right? How would you illustrate that? Every design has a designer.
Art.
All right, art. Okay. What else do you think of?
I'm just gonna go to cookies, but like when you see cookies like that are like all pretty and made up, like they're the shapes of hearts or something, like somebody had to take the time to design that cookie to make it look pretty.
Okay, so the artistic cookies, right? So folding both of those together. That sounds good. All right, what else would you do? Yeah.
Music, like the artist who write the song, write the music, the lyrics. There's so much that goes into it.
Okay, yeah, I like that. What else?
Technology.
Yeah.
You like architecture, like ornate architecture.
Okay. Yeah, very good. So there are a lot of different ways where you can illustrate this point, right? If there's a design, and it's not just that something intrigues us, right? We're intrigued by a lot of stuff, but something has a design to it. It looks like someone made it, okay? So you illustrate the first. Of course, this is where we're going to be spending the bulk of our conversation, which is the second premise of the teleological argument. And there's a specific wording that I like about this, and there's a reason why I go down this route, is that the universe displays a staggering amount of design. Now, we would get ourselves a little bit in trouble if we only found one aspect of the universe or the earth that looks designed. But we don't. There's a lot of them. That's why we're going to say a staggering amount, because it's not just one, it's not just two. There's a ton of things that just can't come out of random assemblies, okay? And what you use kind of with the illustration of this, we use in the cosmological argument, what if you had a box of nothing and you shook it up really hard and you open up the box, what are you going to get? Nothing, because you can't have something come from nothing, right? That would be a miracle. Now, we believe in miracles. We just believe that something or someone made everything out of nothing. That would be God. He has that ability. But at this one, what if I took you guys know Roman, and if you've been to my house, you know all the Lego landmines that we have all over the place that you're going to trip over at some point. If I go and get a scoop of those Legos, thank you, Garrett, for passing on about 5 million of those to my house. But I go and take some of those Legos and I put them in a box and I shake up the box really hard and I open up the box. Am I going to see a Eiffel Tower in there? Why not? Why are them not going to come together and form an Eiffel Tower?
You have to build the Legos, you can't just.
Okay. The probability that they would all come together, that's not how Legos work, right? You got to actually build something out of them. It's like a building, it's like a piece of art, any of those things. And so, does the universe look like a piece of technology? Does it look like a piece of art, or is it just random chance? And we just happen to think that these things are pretty, or that they are useful, or that they look special? Is it we're just intrigued, or is there something a little bit more complex? Does it look more like a Lego set that has been built correctly, or does it look like the box of Legos that Roman left behind that has no design, no purpose to them at all, and it's whatever you want it to be? Well, some people would like the universe to be that way. It's just not, okay? So it's actually going to have some design to it, and there's a lot of different ways. I'm going to show you 3 ways that you can show that the universe has design, and design means purpose, okay? So what is design? It's something that is put together with a purpose. Now, this is also going to teach us something when we get to the conclusion. So you've got the first premise, which is what you illustrate. The second premise is what you prove. And the third premise tells you something about God. So if we see, and we're going to explain it further, the universe has design to it, then we get this conclusion, therefore the universe has a designer. So what we learn about God in the conclusion of this is that he's got to be intelligent. In order to know how to put something together, it's going to take a mind. It's going to take intelligence, okay? So you've got someone that is intelligent, but also he's able to put the pieces together in a very intricate way that we haven't been able to replicate. There's a lot of things that we've been able to make, technology, based off of things that we've observed in the universe, but we still cannot replicate out of nothing or just the bare components that we have in the world and make something like the human eye. We can make some really cool cameras, but we can't make the human eye. We can make some really neat things when it comes to, when we understand biology and how it works, but we haven't been able to create life. All right? And say we as humanity. There's a lot of things that we would like to do, but we're limited in our capacity. But God, the designer, is intelligent. He's also all-powerful, all-knowing. Right? All of those are characteristics that you get about God. So if you put together the cosmological and the teleological, you have someone, right? It's not just a thing. It is someone who's spaceless, timeless, immaterial, personal, intelligent, all-powerful, and all-knowing. Those are a lot of attributes, right? And of course we can go to our Bibles and we can look at those attributes. Of course we can. And we see that all over the place. But what this argument's able to do is piece that together for somebody. And it's solely based off of observation. What do you see? And there are places in Scripture, can you think of any, where people look around at nature and they draw some conclusions about something that is greater than themselves and greater than the universe as a whole? Can you think of some passages, some instances where they observe and they conclude there's something more?
Psalm 19:1.
All right, Psalm 19. As we talked about last week, you got all the the stars and the earth and the moon and the stars. All those things speak. They say something. Okay, so that's a good passage there in Psalm 19, that whole chapter, but certainly starting in verse 1, the heavens declare his handiwork. What else? Think of some people. Can you think of anyone that was told to sit down, be quiet, and look around, and they learned something by observing? Job. Right? In Job chapter 38, after Job has gone on this journey with his friends, trying to figure out why, right? He's asking the big questions, those cultivation questions, he asks them. His friends are trying to ask them, and they're trying to dialogue and get things going. And finally, God speaks out of the whirlwind, and what does he say? Sit down and be quiet, look around. And you start in that chapter, and you start going through, and you'll find where God's like, look at the animals. Did you make those? Look at the earth. Did you design that? Simply be quiet and observe. Now look at Job chapter 42. This is one of my favorite passages because it explains, I think, what we're getting here with this argument. Job 42. Somebody read verses 1 through 6. Job 42, 1 through 6.
I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered what I did and not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Hear, and I'll speak. I will question you, and you will make it known to me. I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in the dust and ashes.
I love that phrase in verse 5. I had heard of you by the hearing of my ear, but now I see you. Intellectually, we can connect a lot of dots to understand there has to be something more. In fact, there are going to be many people that look at the same things that we're looking at, and they're going to conclude there's something more. But we also need to know that there's a lot more that's involved in it. You can have that, all those attributes that we just named out. But how do I know that God cares for me? That's the next level. That's where we're going to go with the rest of our study, is understanding God and his nature, understanding Jesus, understanding the Bible, and we connect all of those. We go through the whole roadmap, and we get to the conclusion that there is a God who cares for me. Now, you got some legwork. You got some groundwork you've got to lay to get to that point. But the same way that Job was told to sit down and be quiet, it wasn't that he was a non-believer, but he had to connect some dots, right? But he saw more clearly. There are a lot of people who are looking at the same things that we're looking at in the universe, but they're coming to a different conclusion. A lot of that is because of their upbringing. Many people will look at the same evidence and they don't conclude the same thing because they know it would require some changes in their life. That's just the facts of it. It's easy to dispel some truth and convince yourself otherwise if it's really going to impact you. It's not something you willfully or volitionally want to do. All right, so keep that in your mind. All right, so we're going to come back to this. Like I said, every week we're going to build these cases. But here's how I want you to know where you can go to in a conversation with somebody and look up what the teleological is. So not just the definition, which means looking at the design and the purpose of the universe, but what are some lines of reasoning? So imagine for a moment, and I need to work on my cosmological argument, but in this same way. But I want you to imagine this yellow building is a science building. And in this science building, there are three main areas that you can go to that's going to help you observe design. So it's a science building. The first station you're going to come across is an observatory. All right, so in an observatory, you're looking at big picture, right? So think about a big telescope that's sitting inside of an observatory, and you're able to see like the Hubble, the big telescopes that are out there where you can see to the far reaches of the universe, okay? That's what you got. I know where Hubble is, but anyways, you just work with me here. But you've got this building, you've got a telescope that's in there, and it's able to go to the far reaches of the universe and to observe the structure of the universe as a whole. We've already talked about the beginning, but now we're going to talk about the design of it. But we're going to narrow it down a little bit, not just, oh man, look at the galaxies, they're so pretty, right? You can pull up the NASA photos, and you can see, man, look at those star clusters. Look at those different universes that are out there in our universe, the different galaxies that are in our universe, and we're so enamored by that, and it's awesome to see those. But I want you to think about this. From what we discovered and what we see, this is the only planet where we are. This is the only planet where humans exist. Now, we could get into, well, what if they discover, okay, let's put all that to the side. Let's just think about our home. Now, we know how this world was designed. We read Genesis chapter 1, you find the beginning God, and he created all of the things, the habitats in which we live, from the light itself to the sky and the sea and the ground. And then he fills those habitats with the inhabitants, us being the last ones on day 6. So we're looking at where we live right now, and that's what we can speak about, because that's what scientists are observing, what we've got here. The observation, or the observatory, is looking at the conditions where humans live. All right? I'm going to show you these 3 parts, and then I'll add a little bit more to it. But in the teleological science building, the observatory, we're going to look at the scope of the universe, but specifically that the universe is designed all the way down to the point where humans, us, are able to live. Okay? You got that stored in your head? The observatory. The second location in this science building is going to be the lab. In the lab, you're able to look at a telescope and you're able to examine, in biology, it's a biology lab. You're able to examine biology and chemistry, all that. Anyways, think about our science classes that we have. But it's like you're able to observe animals and you're able to observe chemicals. That's what you do in a lab. and you can test those things. There are things in the universe that show design that you can put underneath not a telescope, but a microscope. You can get down into some further details, okay? I'm going to give you some examples of that. Biology, microscope, looking at the details. And the last station in this is going to be the data center. All right? And this is where we're going to talk about DNA. DNA is complex. You get not just looking at how things function, that's what you get in the lab, how things function, but you're going to get all the way down to the data underneath. So like in a computer, right? You can get into the strands of data and you're able to learn a lot about how things operate. Well, that's how our universe is going to be as well. So when you think teleological, you got the two premises and a conclusion, but I want you to think about 3 components of the science building: the telescope, microscope, and the computer. The observatory, the lab, and the data center. All right, this is where there's some really cool things about what God has made. All right, so let's talk observationally. Many times we refer to the universe as the Goldilocks universe or the Goldilocks principle. All right, what does that mean? Explain the story of Goldilocks to me real quick. How about that? Let's go with just a simple one. What is this? What's the basis of the Goldilocks story?
It's just right.
It's just right. I like that. I mean, right to the point, right? Where you've got Goldilocks who goes into the bear's house, right? And she's really hungry. She comes across a table and it's got the different chairs, and they weren't just, they weren't the right kind. But she comes across some porridge, all right? And there is the big one that is just too hot. The other one is too cold. But there's the one in the middle that's just right. I believe. Scientists believe, all right, and they prove that our universe is designed in such a way with specificity. And I say they understand it as well because, as many of them have described, it looks like somebody's been monkeying with the physics of the universe in order for humans to be able to live here. The idea of Goldilocks, that it's just right, is the universe is just right for us to be able to live. So here's some examples. Think about oxygen. We need oxygen, correct? Our atmosphere has just the right amount of oxygen in there. Does anybody know what the percentage of oxygen in the air is that we breathe? How many of you have paid attention in Dr. Fungaday's classes? I don't know, does she teach about that one? Is that biology? You should know that. You're right, 25%. All right, so that it's just the right amount in order for us to breathe, okay? If it were too little, we'd suffocate. If it were too much, everything's going to catch on fire, right? So you think about how fire needs more oxygen. And with the sun's rays and everything that come along, if there was too much oxygen, everything could catch on fire, all right? But it's just the right amount, all right? And there's a lot of fun ways to illustrate this. And you get into the gravitational pull and all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of fun ways. The one that I like, an apologist use, he uses the story of the Apollo 13 mission. And that's the one where the spaceship goes out and they have some complications. The first complication they have is that their oxygen is depleted. In fact, one of their oxygen tanks explodes and damages the other one, and so they start asphyxiating because they don't have enough oxygen. And that's going to put them, not only the mission in danger, and that's where Houston, we've got a problem, but it's going to put their lives in danger, and that needed to be corrected. And so there's an apologist that takes the Apollo 13 mission and the things that go wrong and their solutions to it, and it mimics the conditions that the universe has in order for us to live. Because imagine being on a spaceship in the middle of space where you don't have oxygen, and you're trying to navigate and to re-enter into the atmosphere. There are certain things that have to happen. So like on the Apollo 13 mission, after they had all these complications with their oxygen level, they needed to enter back into the atmosphere. Not only did their trajectory have to be correct, but when they came in, they needed to know how fast they were going, what friction would happen with the atmosphere as they were entering it so they could go to the right point, their ship not blow up. If they were going too fast, it would catch on fire. If they were going too slow, they would overshoot and not get their destination. All of that needed to happen. Consider the atmosphere of the Earth. All right? What advantage do we have having the atmosphere that's around us, the ozone layer? What does it do for us? What are some advantages of our ozone layer?
Protects us from the sun, especially.
Okay, protects us from the sun.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate that, right? The transparency of it. If it were less transparent, the sun's rays wouldn't be able to come in heat up the earth in a good way, right? If it were too thick, we would freeze. If it were not transparent enough, thick, transparent, whatever. You got better science terms than I do. But if it let in too much sun, then everything would burn up, right? That'd be the opposite of it. It has to be just right. And we can calculate that, and we can know. And it's another one of those Goldilocks principles. It's just right. Anything more, anything less, it'd be insufficient. There are many different components that match this. So oxygen level, the transparency of the atmosphere, gravitational pull, whether you're dealing with the gravitational pull of the sun and how the planets orbit around it, or even Earth itself and the moon as it rotates around it. The Earth has a gravitational pull that allows the moon to be so close, and it goes through its orbit. And what does the moon do how does the moon and its rotations relate to what happens on this Earth? Tides. If that was anything different, you would have tsunamis, right? You would have cataclysmic world events that would happen if the ocean was not operating the way that it's supposed to, because simply the moon and its gravitational pull. All right, there's a lot of these. The carbon dioxide that we breathe and plants and their operation of it, all of these things are not a random chance. It would be like you taking all the pieces of a Lego set and putting them in a box and shaking them up and hoping that they would all come to place in order for life to exist. The probability is not there, and you understand that needs design. It's like the Apollo 13 spaceship. It had to be just right for humans to be able to live in space. Well, we're living in space. We're just on a ball of mass in the middle of it, right? That's the idea, and it's just right for us to be able to live in the way that we do. So you can geek out as much as you want to on that. If you want more information, you go look it up. But once again, you're trying to navigate a conversation, right? And you've taken somebody to the observatory, the teleological argument. And you say, I want you to look at the universe. I want you to look at the Goldilocks situation that we're in. It's just right for us to be able to live. Then I want you to take them over to the lab. You're going to go to biology. And this is one of my favorite components. Something that's called irreducible complexity. I decided to keep in the more complicated term because it's fun. Irreducible complexity. So on the screen we have a mousetrap. All right. So mousetrap's pretty simple, right? You got the platform, you got the spring, the lever, the latch, and the hammer. This is going to remove the cheese, okay? So some of y'all like to focus on the cheese. But just the structure of the mousetrap itself. If you were to remove one of those components, is it able to work? No, it's not able to function. Now, somebody may say, well, it could still kill a rat. I mean, you could have this platform that maybe the rat, you drop it on top of the rat that's running by, and you might be able to incapacitate him. It's like, no, you have to have all these things working. We're talking about the functionality of this. You cannot reduce it down further and it still be functional, right? Do you see that? Do you understand it? Do you know there are certain things in the universe, and when we put it underneath the microscope, that look a lot like a mousetrap, but it's biology, all right? Darwin says this. You're familiar with Charles Darwin and his exploration to understand the origin of the species. And when he's examining the finches over on the islands and he's seeing how everything is formed, he says, okay, he concludes, right, is that there have been these small incremental changes that have led to where we are. He's like, you started with a latch, and then you had a spring that came from that, and then you go, and finally you end up with a mousetrap. Is that what we observed in creation? He says that what we call creation, what we observed on the earth. Darwin makes this point in his book. He says, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ, I'm going to show you some complex organs, any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory of evolution, Darwinian perspective, would absolutely break down. Well, let's break down his view, okay? Because there are things that we can prove that you cannot reduce them down any further and they still be functional. And so my personal favorite is the bombardier beetle, all right? Do you guys know what the bombardier beetle is? You ever seen this guy? Some of you are nodding, some yes. All right, this is my favorite bug. Because you've got this beetle, and he has two fluid sacs in his body, all right? He's able to compress his body, squeeze these fluids together, and they enter into a secondary chamber. And when the fluids come together, they come to 212 degrees. What happens when water gets to 212 degrees? All right, it boils. He's got this boiling liquid inside of him. And then, just a bonus, he can fire that out at 500 rounds per second out of his backside. All right, that's what he's doing here. I have this clip specifically. It's not the video clip, but it's this picture from BBC Earth. If you ever go watch like the Planet Earth and BBC Earth series, they do a study. They're showing us all these cool pictures and videos of these beetles. And I thought it was interesting. The narrator said, essentially, we don't know how this bug came to be, because can you reduce him down any further and he be functional? I mean, think about how many iterations you have to go through the bombardier beetle of him just going, exploding. Well, that didn't work. Next one, exploding. It's like, can you imagine? But we don't have any, shrapnel evidence. We don't have any forensic files that we can look to see these various iterations of this very complex organ, this bug. He just is. Evolution would say over time, you had these two fluid sacs that eventually formed. Well, how many times did that little membrane in between them not work out for him? All right? And just kept exploding and going on from there. Well, you cannot reduce the bombardier beetle any further. It just wouldn't exist. Okay? There are a lot of things in creation that look like this. I was just introduced to another. All of these, I have Kyle Butt in my head, and I can just hear him talk about the bombardier beetle, in his southern drawl. But Nate was reminding me of another one that I went and watched this video today, the hagfish. Go listen to Kyle Butt talk about the snot snake. It's fantastic, okay? But there's a lot of these, and so once again, I just have Kyle in my head talking about each one of them. But there are many things that are in creation, what we call creation, that you can't reduce down any further. Evolution would not be able to explain them. Out of curiosity, do you know any? Do you know any intricate things that you could put underneath a microscope and say that shows design? Because evolution would not be able to explain that. What comes to your mind?
Gastric acid.
Okay, why do you say that?
It can strip paint off wood, yet you don't digest your own stuff.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one, right? And that's necessary. We need that. Yes, sir.
Blood clotting.
Blood clotting, yeah. That's huge. The process that you go through, if you've ever seen, it's almost like a flow chart, if you want to think about it in that way, of how blood clotting happens. Very complex, very detailed. You can't reduce that down any further. Yeah, I like that. What else? I see anybody else's hand go up. You might think about a giraffe. They talk about a giraffe in his neck, how high up he is, and then if he were to bend over, the heart would explode because of the blood pressure that goes through there. There's a lot of things like that. It's like, how many versions of a giraffe did you go through? But what do we also have? No fossil records showing these iterations of it. So then that's where you'd bring in a little bit more. But you put it under a microscope, okay? And you can break these things down, or you can get them so far, but you can't break them all the way down. So you've got the bombardier beetle, but the other one is this little flagellum motor. Now, this is what's on the side of a bacteria, and this is just the motor itself. I don't think I put in here the picture of the actual tail of the motor. Let me see. Oh, yeah. Here's what it looks like. All right, so there's this little tail. If you ever looked underneath a microscope and you've seen a little cell that's moving around, and it's got a little tail that's flickering on it, well, because our microscopes have gotten better, you see this little tail, and it's able to navigate. It's able to spin clockwise and counterclockwise. This is a basic outboard motor, and it's made of proteins. Okay, this is exactly what's on the back of a boat. Okay, and you're able to reverse the propeller one way and the other, and it's made of proteins. And a cell, in order to replicate, or that bacteria that this is on, it's made of proteins, but you have to have the information that tells the proteins how to form the way that they are. Now, the reason why I brought this one up, I like it, one, it's colorful, and two, you might be familiar with this guy. He does a YouTube channel called Smarter Every Day. He's an Alabamian. He's from Coleman, and he worked with NASA, but he did this exploration of this little motor. This is actually what it looks like if you were to replicate it with our data that we have now. And that's the way that it operates. It's showing you how it spins, and it has that little protein at the top that tells it which way to turn, clockwise or counterclockwise, like a DC motor. You go look up what those things mean. But he does this whole study, and I like this YouTube series because he gets to the end of it, and he gives his audience a chance, because a lot of times he's just talking about cool stuff that are out there. And he gets to the back of this, the end of this video, and he says, look, my goal... He said, my encouragement for you is just to look and see what provides the best explanation for things like this. Did random chance produce this? Or does it have the fingerprint of a designer? He said, you decide. He said, I know where I plant my flag. I just thought that was very neat and very bold for somebody that has millions of views and is not going to back down from it. It's probably a good reminder for us. How many times do we back down in a conversation just because we may feel uncomfortable? But we know what happens if we get back down. We can corral it in. Okay, so there's a lot of things, right, that you can put underneath a microscope and observe the details of it. You talk about the human eye, all of those things. All right, but the last stage in your conversation is you're going to get to the data center. Now, I understand this is still biology, but let's just go a little bit deeper. We're going to talk about information and human DNA. Human DNA is just fascinating in and of itself because of the amount of information that DNA holds. I mean, you can relate it to encyclopedias. And once again, there's a lot of illustrations that just in a single cell amoeba, that there is the equivalent of 1,000 copies of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Has anyone ever seen the Encyclopedia Britannica? Right, I haven't. All right, so I can't tell you what a whole series that looks like. Maybe your grandparents have one on their shelf, all right, and it's that whole series. But it's usually what we see at a yard sale, where people are getting rid of those book series, and you're like, hey, I think I'd like to have that in my library. Maybe, Brian, you have one at your home. But you know what I'm talking about, right? It's like, all right, we understand the idea of an encyclopedia, but the amount of information, it's a lot. Okay, there's a lot of information just in human DNA. Now, what I think is so fascinating about human DNA is that it requires itself to produce more. All right, so you can get, I know you guys know how to draw a nice little model of a cell, and it's got all the, your powerhouse in there, and it's got the food, you see the strand of RNA that comes out of it with the information. You see all this, right? You see the double helix. I know this is really what human DNA actually looks like. But DNA has a message to it. Is that what random chance would produce? So you go from absolutely nothing, right? So our friends that are evolutionists, naturalists, they're going to say, well, we all started off in this, pool of goo, and then eventually some things started coming together where you had a single cell amoeba, and the amoeba produced, and it just goes on from there. So essentially you go from the goo through the zoo to you, right? That's where you finally line up in your life, is because it's just slow incremental changes over time. Or are these things just the way that they are? If you get down to the data center and you examine human DNA and the information that's in there, does it look more like a fingerprint of a creator, a designer, or does it look like something where you were able to shake up a bunch of Legos in a box and you get what you get? Okay, so this is how you can navigate a conversation. Now, I just real quick, I want to show you some objections that may come up so you can be prepared to research them further of how you would respond to them. So you go through this and you say, okay, every design has a designer. The universe has a design. The universe displays a staggering amount of design, evidence of design. Therefore, the universe has a designer. Somebody may come back and say, well, evolution explains it. Like, we all know that we see evolution that happens. Well, we don't see macro evolution, these big from species to species. You see small adaptations just in general, in the sense of the survival of the fittest in some ways, right? You see genes that are passed on in certain regions, things like that, but don't get caught off guard by this idea that evolution, what all is involved in it. There's an easy way to respond to it. And it's not that evolution explains everything. It falls short, and that's what Darwin was showing us, wasn't it? You can't reduce down the bombardier beetle any further. And if that's the case, then his whole system crumbles as well while the bombardier beetle goes off, firing off his hot liquid anytime he wants. All right, so you've got that. And then you've got number two, you give chance a chance. Somebody's like, oh, okay, give it enough time. So let's say that if you were to shake the box enough, eventually it's going to happen. It's like if you were to take a monkey and sit him down at a typewriter and just say, go to town. What's the chances that he's going to be able to type out Shakespeare's Hamlet? Well, given enough time and chance, eventually that's what's going to happen. Is that what we observe? Chance is something that we hide behind as a term. Even when we say that, all right, what's the chance that if you were to take a quarter and flip it, that it's going to land on heads or tails? You would say 50-50. But what you're missing is the person who's flipping the quarter. And that's the idea. You're talking about chance, but how did these things line up in order for chance to even be produced? Insert the cosmological argument. You have to have a cause behind it. Some people may accuse us of what's called God of the gaps. This is what our friends in the past, as they tried to explain the universe and how things operated, they gave it a godly name. So we don't know how the sun rises and sets, so it might be a god who's carrying it across the sky. We don't know how the seasons work, so maybe it's a Persephone that is going down and visiting Hades, and she comes back, and when she leaves it's winter, and when she comes back it's summer and spring. So you guys are just espousing God of the gaps. You have a gap in your knowledge and you're saying it's God. Well, it's interesting. That's exactly what scientists do as well. They say, we don't have an explanation. We don't know where the universe came from. We don't know why these things look the way they do, but we'll eventually find the science behind it. That's science of the gaps. That's the equivalent of what they're saying to us. But it's another version of give chance a chance. And then this one. You see what you want to see. You're looking and you see design because that's what you're trying to define. For them, they look and they don't see any design at all. They just see what is. But our challenge, going back to what we're proving in the second premise, it's not just one thing, it's a staggering amount of these. Can you really come up with an explanation that each one of these things looks more like chance, or it looks more like evolution, or it looks more like a lot of time produced these, or does it look like they have a fingerprint of a designer? So when you're in the science building and you're looking at the sky, you're looking at the intricacies of the machines themselves, and you're looking deep within at the data, what's the best explanation for what you're observing? And I think you get to the conclusion of the teleological argument, which is there is a designer who is intelligent, all-powerful, and all-knowing. And that sounds a lot like our God. So appreciate you guys. If you want to keep your material up here, you're welcome to do that. We'll pick up next week with the moral argument.